We have had firsthand experience managing 7-day operations in several different geographical locations across the country. Properly managing a 7-day operation requires you to consider creative staffing and planning needs. These include driver scheduling, management staffing, projecting volume, and using proper vehicle sizes. Staffing for 7-day operations in the transportation industry can get complicated, but there are 3 common methods that we have seen work in this space. The first method is the 3-day on, 4-day off method. With this method, you have Staff A and Staff B. Staff A employees work the first 3 days and then are off for the next 4 days. Staff B works those 4 days that Staff A has off and then has the next 3 days off while Staff A works. This will switch each week. The best way to implement this method with your current staff is to extend your drivers' on-road hours to be anywhere from 10 to 12 hours per day, since they are working fewer days per week. This method can also potentially reduce the amount of trucks that you have on the road each day, saving you insurance, fuel, and maintenance costs. It also earns you a more dedicated staff than if you had to utilize part-time drivers. This method requires you to have trucks large enough to hold 10 to 12 hours worth of deliveries. If your trucks are over 10,000 pounds, then your drivers can only drive for 11 hours at a time in a 14-hour time period, so you'll need to be mindful of that to avoid committing any DOT hours of service violations. Method 2 is having a deep bench of part-time drivers with varying schedules. With this method, you have a core team of drivers that works 5 to 6 days per week, and supplement that with part-time drivers that drive 1 to 2 days per week. This method is much easier to implement because it is a more familiar concept than the 3-day on, 4-day off method. Drivers won't have to acclimate to longer days and you won't have to redo route plans. The biggest challenge with this method, though, is finding and retaining those part-time drivers. Since this job wouldn't be their main source of income, there may not be as much motivation to show up for every shift. This can create a little bit of chaos and can make weekends hectic, but you can combat this by hiring more part-time drivers to create that deep bench to pull from. We found that firefighters and landscapers work out well as part-time drivers due to their flexible schedules. The third method is similar to the second, but involves having a weekend-only crew. In most markets, your heaviest volume will fall on Monday through Friday. This is also your traditional 5-day work week, so most full-time drivers prefer this shift. Weekends are ideal for part-time drivers who want some extra spending money or want to make ends meet. The good news here is that weekends are also more relaxed in terms of scheduled deliveries, so it's an ideal environment for these part-time drivers. This method also works well for the line haul space. We recommend having part-time drivers on staff to cover weekends or 1 to 2 days per week on the line haul run you are trying to staff. No matter what scheduling method you decide to use, you should always be hiring part-time drivers to cover call-outs, no-shows, and other drivers' vacation time. Another staffing issue we need to touch on relates to your management team. When it comes to your manager staffing in 7-day operations, you're going to need 1 or more lead drivers in addition to your primary manager. The first is going to cover your overflow and can assist with things like breakdowns, and the second is going to have a dedicated route except for the days that your manager is off. On those days, number 1 will act as the primary manager and number 2 will need to cover the lightest route and any overflow for that day. If possible, it's important to keep your manager off of a dedicated route so they can have the flexibility to adapt to unanticipated volume fluctuations. You'll want to structure your manager and lead driver schedules so that everyone has 2 days off to prevent burnout. Now, you may be wondering where Sunday's volume comes from and how to project and schedule for that day. Volume varies by operation, but what we've observed is that Sunday's volume is pulled forward from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday's volume. So those days are going to be a little bit lighter, and Thursday, Friday, and Saturday are going to be a little bit heavier on package volume. For Sundays, the benchmark that we would expect to see is about 10% of your total weekly volume. We encourage you to communicate with the terminal and use the work area planner as a tool to project, along with taking a look at your historical volume for each day on your daily service worksheets. It's also important to mention that FedEx Ground has and can suspend Sunday deliveries in very rural markets where the volume just isn't justified. However, the vast majority of the United States does service Sunday deliveries, and every contractor should know how to handle Sunday volume regardless of their market. The last thing to consider when managing a 7-day operation is vehicle size. FedEx Ground has historically pushed the use of smaller vehicles for Sunday deliveries. But as we discussed earlier, we want to maximize what your drivers can do in a single day. Sending them out in small vehicles is going to limit them on the numbers of deliveries that they make. Using larger trucks can maximize efficiencies and reduce the number of routes you need on a given day. The one exception to this would be for rural territories. If you're dispatching a high mileage route, you'll want to use a smaller vehicle because they're going to have fewer stops and packages, and it will be more fuel efficient than a larger vehicle. The ultimate goal when managing 7-day operations is to get the most efficiency out of your drivers in a single day. The more resources that you can cut and the more efficiently you can run will help to reduce payroll, fuel, and maintenance expenses and allow your operation to become more profitable.